think it's all about clarity of what it is that you want and then really leaning into the why behind it. I had such a strong why that anything else didn't feel like a possibility to me.
Welcome back to the Happiness and Progress podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Craig. I'm an Emmy Award-winning journalist, a mom, wife, and you know what I like to say, just a person looking for more joy in the everyday. It is the first week of January, and I really want to set you up for success and with a huge vision for your year. And so I got vision board extraordinaire, Lyssa Jackson, to come on the podcast. I am so excited to hear from you. She is a creator, coach, and founder of CreateHER Co. She is a certified life and success coach. She has been vision boarding for more than a decade with great success, and she started teaching classes about the topic a few years ago. She has since helped hundreds of students create vision boards. She is the author of the recently published EnvisionHER, the vision board book for women, a book designed to be cut into pieces to create a vision board that works. In this conversation, we talk about how to allow for magic in your goal setting, what to do when your vision is not happening, dealing with setbacks that are out of your control, and Lyssa is going to share her unique way of doing vision boards. I am so excited that you get to hear from her because I have been watching her in real time manifest real dreams as we've been friends for a couple years on social media. So let's get to it. Lyssa, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Let's jump right into this because we've been friends on Instagram for a couple of years now, and I just watch you just continue to manifest things, and it's really, really exciting. So tell me a little bit about what manifesting has done in your life.
I think for me, manifesting is really another way of setting really big goals and then going after them through action, but also allowing for a little bit of magic in between, right? There are some things that we just can't explain. So for me, manifesting has been all about growing myself with not having a lot of resources on that path. So my story is that I really grew up in poverty. I didn't have a lot of resources. My parents weren't very educated. They never went to college. So I really feel like my first experience with what I would call manifesting was getting really crystal clear on being able to go to college and get a full scholarship. And I had a lot of people around me who said, that's not possible. That's really unrealistic. The chances that, especially if you want to go to a private college like I did, that you're going to get a full scholarship for a college that costs more than $60,000 a year is a really unrealistic expectation. But I really felt like I could do it, and I did. And so ever since then, I've realized that I was really onto something in terms of being able to set big goals. And so now as a coach, it's something that I try to help other people do and support them with, and saying, yes, a lot of people are going to tell you that your dreams and your goals are unrealistic, but if they're realistic for you and you feel them in your heart, that's for you and something you should work towards. So it's really changed my life. I now work for LinkedIn, which is a big goal I set for myself. I have my own business, and I'm always setting bigger and bigger goals and calling it manifesting along the way.
I love that. And what I love about your story is that all the naysayers, especially when you're young, when you're in high school and you're trying to chart this path, especially when you're the first one in your family to do that, when you have naysayers that you didn't let that stop you. How did you keep going in the face of you can't do this, this is unrealistic?
I think when you have something that you just know deep down that you need to do, and it's the thing that's going to change everything. Like for me, I knew that going to college, at least in my early years, maybe now entrepreneurship is more of an option, but in those early years, going to college was my chance to get out of poverty. And I was so set on that goal that no matter what, nobody was going to talk me out of the possibility. And my thinking was, even if I don't get a full scholarship, if I work really hard and I focus and I obsess over applying to scholarships, and there's plenty of scholarships that I didn't get, right? There's so many more that were failures, or I didn't get through to the final round. And then there was just a small percentage that I did. So between the scholarship that my college gave me and then the rest that I earned through individual scholarships, I really did it. I actually sort of profited off of going to college, which was an interesting thing. I really did. I got money back at the end of it. So, you know, I think it's all about clarity of what it is that you want, and then really leaning into the why behind it. I had such a strong why that anything else didn't feel like a possibility to me, right? So I got so intensely focused on it that I would really do anything to get it. And I think at the end of the day, when we're looking to meet a goal, there's always other people involved in that decision. In my case, it's admissions folks, it's financial aid folks. And when they come into contact with somebody who shows how much they want something, it's really hard to ignore that, right? That's the same story. That same story is repeated over and over again for every opportunity that I've had, including now working at my dream job at LinkedIn, right? A big part of that was just them knowing how much I wanted it and how much it meant to me. That I was also competent and had the skills and everything else, but it's that genuine, this is what I want, this clarity that can be so powerful.
When did you develop that why?
Well, I think for every different goal, you develop the why at a different stage. But for me, anytime I start to dream a new dream, if I can't find a strong enough why for it, it kind of starts to fade. But if that why is something that I can get
so
really
true.
Right? If I can get really clear on that why, that's what puts you into the mode of really going after it. Right. So for me, at least in terms of the timeline of where why comes, for college, it came in early high school. For LinkedIn, it came a few years ago, right? And when I was starting to formulate where I really wanted to be. I was a retail manager at the time, and I was really unhappy. I had gotten out of poverty paycheck wise, but I hadn't really fulfilled this dream job of working in tech and having my own business at the same time. And so I was formulating that. So in terms of the timeline, the why always has to come before you really set all the intentions for the goal, right? Otherwise it kind of fades out. And those are the goals that we leave behind.
I like how you said, these are goals with a lot of action, but also allowing for the magic in there. Tell me what this looks like in real time. How is the magic coming in? I'm such a control freak that sometimes I don't think I leave the room for the magic because I'm so type A. So tell me a little bit about how this actually looks as it's happening in your life.
I think, you've got to leave a little bit of room for magic. And anytime something, what I would call magical, anybody who's more scientific or practical might be able to look back and put the pieces together and say, well, that happened because of X, Y, and Z. But a perfect example is where I'm sitting right now, right? I'm sitting in an apartment that I absolutely love. It's sort of my dream location for me right now. And I've been using vision boarding as a tool to set goals and help me visualize for years. And what's so funny is when I was in college about 5 or 6 years ago, maybe 7 now, I had a vision board that I wanted to move to this specific location, this part of the country. And so I put a pamphlet for an apartment complex on that vision board. And eventually I did move to this area. I didn't necessarily move to whatever was in the pamphlet. So, I took it off my vision board and I kind of packed it away. I like to take once things come true for me and I feel satisfied, I take them off my vision board and I'll put them in a box. And I was sifting through that box the other day, kind of looking for examples that I could share with people. And I pulled out the flyer, totally forgetting that I set this goal 5 years ago. And I kid you not, it was the pamphlet for the exact apartment that I live in right now. And I had not put 2 and 2 together. So to me, that's where the kind of magical serendipity comes in. And I have so many other examples of that because I set an intention. And I'm sure somewhere in my subconscious mind, right, there's a file packed away back there that when I was looking at apartments and this was now something that I could afford and was happy to invest in as a place to live, that like somewhere in my mind, I recognized it, but I didn't remember consciously kind of making that decision. But that's the power of intention.
Yeah. Wow. That is incredible. That must have felt really exciting when you made that connection. This is real. The stuff that I'm talking about, this is real. This is really happening.
Yeah. Yeah. So you sort of create your own magic.
I once was applying for jobs in Las Vegas. I was totally unqualified, but I wanted to live there because that's where my then boyfriend, now husband, lived. And I was offered a job out of state, like 2 states away. And I was sitting at a Kinko's. This is back when you had to like fax contracts. So I went to Kinko's. I'm like standing there with my contract, looking at the fax machine. And then I just cannot fax this contract because once I do, I'm in for 2 years. I'm away from my boyfriend. So I go out of Kinko's and I'm just like bawling. I have no job in Las Vegas and I have to move. And then literally when I'm sitting on the side of this freeway entrance, outside of Kinko's, I get a phone call from one of the news stations, and they literally in a 5-minute conversation offered me the job that I was unqualified for and no interview. Isn't that wild?
Yep. See,
That's
you
magic.
can't explain. That's magic. And so you just look for it. Magic doesn't happen for people who say magic doesn't exist. If you let even just a little bit in, it'll show up, and you can call it serendipity. You can call it coincidence. But it's just allowing that, you're saying, I'm going to do the work. I'm going to show up. I'm going to set the intention, but I won't always be able to explain why it happens. And that's okay.
I love that. You have had a really difficult year medically. And
Yes.
How were you able to move forward as you're fighting for your life? I mean, do you even think about your dreams when you're fighting for your life? I don't know. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking. It's been a really difficult year for me, but also it's something where, I've always been a really motivated, goal-oriented person. I think it's a hunger that comes from my upbringing and not having a lot and struggling in my childhood to really saying, I want something better for myself. And I think I can do that. But when I did get sick this year and I ended up in the hospital, I was in a hospital bed for almost a month. I had sepsis. It was really scary and it was really on the edge. And I was taking all these antibiotics and nothing seemed to be working. I had to get surgery. And so after that month, coming back home was really emotional because I was okay. I made it through. I'm getting healthier every day. I'm getting stronger every day. But really small things just fell away, right? Sort of the superficial things that we care about, whether it's appearance or, suddenly I had all these scars in my abdomen and, the idea that I couldn't wear a bikini suddenly like didn't matter anymore. Well, I can wear a bikini to be clear, but like worrying about that didn't really faze me anymore. And the smallest things, like I remember coming home from the hospital, my boyfriend was driving me home finally, and it was the middle of the summer. So I saw a sunflower, and the sunflower, after being in these beige walls of the hospital for so long, like just made me cry. And it's actually deepened my sense of wanting to make the most out of life, because when you have an experience like that, you see just how finite everything can be, and it makes you want to leave more of your stamp on the world. So that's been my experience. It hasn't been easy. I was upset a lot and I was scared. That is real. But I'm coming out on the other side saying, I really do want to make sure that I serve the world as best I can before it is my ultimate time to leave it.
It has to be hard with being someone who's so goal oriented to have your goals take a total backseat so that your number one goal can be your health. How did you deal with that?
It definitely was difficult for me to sit still, but at the same time, I felt so exhausted during the whole period that the idea of, even in the moments that I was feeling a little bit better in the hospital, the idea of even taking out, say, my laptop or connecting to the hospital Wi-Fi and trying to do anything just wasn't on my mind, right? I really had to focus on, this is my time to take care of myself and in recovery as well. So, it's all about saying my focus right now is my health. And I think it's also changed my balance going forward too. Ambitious people, I know in my experience, being such an ambitious person, it's easy to lean into burnout and trying to do everything. And my philosophy after all of this has definitely changed. And now I say, I've got to set boundaries even better than I already was. And I've got to learn to prioritize my health over achievement at any cost, because you are the golden goose, especially when you run your own business. But even when you have a full-time job, you're the golden goose. And if you take all of your golden eggs, right, you're not, if you kill the goose, so to speak, you don't have any more golden eggs to lay. So you have to take care of yourself.
It sounds like you had a lot of aha moments through this experience.
Yeah. And I really deeply empathize. It was my first experience truly being sick. And now I really have this deep empathy for folks who are dealing with chronic illness, long-term illness, or just a sickness for themselves or in their family, and how difficult that can be. And I think that's what motivates me even more in my business, to make sure that people are setting goals that help set them up for moments that will inevitably happen, hopefully not as extreme as in my case, but you and I both know that things come up, things happen, and creating, a business or a lifestyle that supports you through those hard moments is a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's really important. When you feel like things, first I want to ask, how are you doing now? How's your health now?
I'm doing really well. I've been
Okay.
the particular type of infection that I had has put me on long-term antibiotics. So that's something that I'm still healing from, and still really taking care of myself, and just getting stronger, because I lost so much muscle when I had to be in bed for so long, really ultimately over 2 months of resting. But I'm feeling much better. I'm exercising again, and some days I forget that it even happened. It almost feels like a dream, which is something I'm incredibly grateful for.
Well, you look better, and it's been nice to be able to see you showing up online again. But I was so glad when you weren't, and you would get on and say, I can't show up right now. And I thought that was really great too. So I'm glad you made that space.
Yeah.
Okay. When you feel like things are not happening, you're like, I put this on my vision board. I'm even putting action behind it, and things are not happening. How do you deal with that?
I love that question, because I think, as somebody who sort of teaches vision boarding, and I've been vision boarding for almost a decade now, right? It's something that's really important to me as a tool, but I know that I can be rather impatient when it comes to things coming to life, right? A perfect example is my dream job that I have at LinkedIn now. And I absolutely love it, but that's an intention. That's a goal and something I put on my vision board more than 5 years ago now. And 5 years feels like for absolute ever when you're setting an intention or a goal. And I will totally admit that there were a lot of times where I thought to myself, it's easy to slip into self-doubt and say, maybe I'm really just not qualified. I'm not good enough. I've set too much of a lofty goal for myself. And I think the key thing that I want to share within that is just that self-doubt, or visualizing the wrong thing happening, or visualizing the outcome you don't want, contrary to popular belief, really isn't the worst thing. It's not like by visualizing or have like the wrong thing or having self-doubt that you're going to completely derail yourself and not attract it. I don't see it that way. In fact, a lot of studies are showing that thinking about, the worst case scenario within reason is actually quite good for you, because then you start planning around what potential obstacles there are. So the thing that I really tap into is, what have I already made happen that I doubted in the past? So the way that I teach vision boarding is very specific for this reason. I don't do the glue down style. I also don't have people use magazines, because most magazines aren't great for setting goals, but you take these pictures and you pin them to your vision board. And when they come true, because things will start coming true, even if it's a little small goal, to really get you in the habit of saying, okay, put it up, I make it happen. I have a dream box, and it's actually right behind me. It's absolutely jam-packed. And every time I make something come true, that visual representation goes in that box. And when I'm having the kind of day where I say, I must suck, I'm an imposter, I think I'm in the wrong place, whatever doubt is creeping, because it does. It's not about completely getting rid of those voices. Like, I think they'll always be there, because you're always possibly reaching for the next level. I take that box and I dump it out all over the floor, and I say, look at all these things that I've made happen, that I had doubt and I had worries, and I still made them happen. And I sort of remind myself what I'm capable of, right? My college commencement brochure, the packet is in there, right? There's awards that I've won, there's ribbons, there's conference badges, there's all kinds of different things that prove that I accomplished something. And that's really what I tap into, because I have doubt all the time. I have goals that I'm setting right now where I'm saying, is this too big? Is this too much? And I have to tap in and really get used to the idea of doing that and sort of practice what it would feel like in my body to have those things.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really what it's about for me. It's about looking back on what I've accomplished.
I love that you mentioned that about everyone having these negative thoughts and these doubts about what they can actually achieve, because I think if we let those hold us back, we will be held back, because we all have doubts. We have to just accept the fact that we have doubts, that's a human trait, and our thoughts think these thousands of thoughts a day, and doubt's going to be one of them. We just have to reroute. Every time it comes in, just reroute. And I heard long ago, doubt your doubt. And so
oh, I love that.
I love that. Just doubt your doubt. And I love, love, love the dream box that you have in place as well. Because I also always say, look to the evidence, look to the evidence of what you've been able to do. Okay, I want to read this online. You wrote this on Instagram. It says, when I'm frustrated to no end with the universe and can't for the life of me seem to call in what I desire on the timeline that I want it, I have one simple mantra. I can't mess up what I'm meant for. You can't mess up what you're meant for. If you messed it up, you didn't get the call, you didn't get the text, or you didn't reach the target, your redirection was protection. When you know you can't mess up what's meant for you, you will walk through the world differently. Your energy will shift, and the things that are meant for you will come more easily. I love this idea of your redirection was protection. How have you learned that?
Over and over and over again. A really, really great example is, I'm going to go back to this dream job that I have at LinkedIn now, right? For context, the class of people who they call them classes when you join a cohort of new LinkedIn employees, the acceptance rate was 0.04% this year.
Wild.
Which is just, it's easier to get into Stanford. It's easier to get into Harvard. And when I was in the process of applying for new positions, I knew I was looking for an instructor type position at a company. I kept getting so frustrated. I applied to probably about 57 different jobs, which actually is quite low for the average job seeker these days, but 57. And I would get to these companies that seemed like a pretty good fit. Okay, this is perfect fit. This is around the salary that I'm looking for. It kind of checked all the boxes. And I would get to the second interview and I would feel so frustrated because they would call me back and say, we went with somebody else or whatever it was. And I really started to think maybe I'm not really qualified for these jobs at these companies that seem great. They kind of check all the boxes on my list. I'd be perfectly happy working here, but I wasn't super excited about any of them. They were kind of a growth step from what I was doing at another smaller tech company. But in the back of my mind, I had set that intention, 5 or 6 years ago, that I want to work for either Google or LinkedIn. That was my dream for the longest time. And so when I kept getting rejected, I felt like something was wrong. And then I saw this position at LinkedIn and I thought, I'm just going to apply. I didn't even write a cover letter. I didn't do any of the things that you're supposed to do to land a job. And I now realize, because the interview process was so long for that, if I had accepted another position, I would have thwarted my ability to then accept that position at LinkedIn. And so looking back, I believe exactly that. It's like the rejection that I kept receiving and felt so frustrated and thinking maybe I'm aiming too high. I actually think it was the opposite. In a lot of ways, I was aiming too low, right? I was actually more qualified than I realized. And that redirection landed me in the precise place that I was meant for. And I see that pattern play out so often that I can't not believe it now.
Yeah, that's incredible. I got goosebumps as you said that. I wasn't aiming too high, I was aiming too low. That is amazing. Okay, I want to make sure that people have the tools to do a vision board like you do. They can get that at your Instagram. You have reels on this. I think they're pinned to the top of your
Yeah.
profile.
Yeah.
But let's talk about it here a little bit. You mentioned that you don't tape anything down, you don't glue anything down. You use a cork board, right?
Yep.
So that things are easily removable. You talked a little bit about, so this is so that you can actually accomplish the goals. What else would you want people to know to start getting together a vision board like this?
I think putting away the magazines is probably the first step, because I would say, 95% of folks that share about how to create vision boards, they recommend, magazines or things that are around your house. And that's fine. That's certainly one way to do a vision board. But when I think about sort of the science and the practicality of setting goals and dreaming about things, the number one thing that you need to tap into is specificity, right? Often when I look at a vision board of, maybe that I see online or even on Pinterest, I see things like pictures of butterflies, pictures of flowers. Maybe there's what we would think of as a, standard bikini body, for example, or we might have, I want to feel great or something like that. And you sort of see this mashup. And the main question that I would ask somebody in that case is, well, how will you know when you achieve that, right? If it says, I won't recommend this as a goal, but if, for example, if it says, I want to lose weight on that vision board, I'm going to ask you, well, what does that mean for you? Like, when will you know that you achieve that? So it's all about going and finding images that specifically align with your exact goal. So, great example, one of my big goals is to, be featured in Forbes. That's something that I'm currently working on manifesting. So I have the Forbes logo, up on my vision board. And so I know when I accomplish that goal, I now get to take that Forbes logo off and I'm going to go put it in my dream box. And then, on some rainy day, I'll be able to bring that back up and say, oh, yeah, I remember when I was mentioned in Forbes. I remember when that happened. So it's all about having a visual where you can actually look at it and really practice that feeling. Because sometimes our goals are scary. To this moment, if I think about being featured in Forbes, it makes me sweat a little bit, because it's still a big goal for me. It still feels there's still that self-doubt that's going to creep in. But when I look up there and I just practice that feeling, eventually when it does come, I'm not going to feel so nervous because I've practiced it so many times. And then it's going to become part of evidence that I can make anything happen. And then maybe I'll go after the Harvard Business Review, or I'll go after Entrepreneur Magazine, or whatever it might be.
When you were talking and you talked about putting that in your dream box, and you would think, and some days when you needed to remember, you'd pull it out. My first thought was, do you ever forget when you are featured in Forbes? But you know what's interesting? When we're doubting ourselves, I think we do. I think we do. Yeah. So that's very, very cool. I have loved talking to you. I have loved watching you do this in real time. That's been very exciting. And so I thank you for sharing some of this with my listeners. Before I let you go, I want to ask you my question I ask everyone, which is, what is your number one tip for finding more joy in the good, the bad, and the in-between?
For me, it's all about finding the happiness that comes from growth rather than the actual destination, right? We talked a lot about creating evidence that you've achieved your goals, and achieving your goal is absolutely wonderful. It's a high like no other. But if we only focus on goals that we're trying to achieve, and we don't find gratitude for the things that we've already made happen, and even gratitude for the steps in between, it really starts to put us on that treadmill of like, well, what's next? What's next? What's next? What's going to get me that next hit of dopamine that's going to make me feel important, is going to make me feel successful? And instead we have to say, I feel successful because I'm even stepping out and setting bigger goals and sharing with the world and showing up. And so for me, it's always a reminder of that. So gratitude has to be really mixed into the goal setting process as well. And I think the more you share gratitude, the more you get. Like, a perfect example, a super quick anecdote to kind of paint this picture is, I specifically remember I have a gratitude journal. I've been keeping it for years. I was reading a book by Oprah, and I remember writing in my gratitude journal, I'm so grateful for this message that, Oprah is sharing to me, and that I live in a world where wisdom can be shared with me through, a book or headphones. And I kid you not, the very next day, it was announced that she was going to be the commencement speaker at my college.
Wow.
And because
I had this, cool.
I had this vision of, maybe going to her show when she still had the show live. And I actually got to see Oprah in person. And I was like, there's a connection there. That's a little bit of that magic of like showing gratitude along the way. I think it just attracts more like to you, like attracts like. So that would be how I feel about that.
Oh my goodness, I have goosebumps. That was so good and such a perfect way to round out the interview to make sure that we have gratitude along the way. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Happy New Year.
You too. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Lyssa. Of course, you can find all of her information in show notes, as well as how to take her various courses and to learn more about vision boarding from her Instagram. And if you liked listening to this episode, I just want to ask you to please take a quick moment to go hop into the ratings, give this podcast a rating, tell me what you liked about this episode. That helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate the feedback. Thank you so much for being here on Happiness in Progress.